Hey everyone, welcome to this week's reading of Shard of the Sun. We are picking back up where we were at chapter 14, so we'll just get right into it. I'm sorry, Broderick, Derek said. Emotions erupted across his face. I choose my wife. Don't worry about me, Broderick shouted to his cousin. Farron motioned to Liam. Bring her body, he instructed. Broderick was about to say something when Vyas punched him in the mouth, then wrapped his arm around Broderick's neck and jerked him away from the wall. Broderick struggled against him, but Vyas was stronger. Liam left quickly, running down the stairs and into the castle. How was he going to explain the woman was still alive? Fear gripped him as he thought about the horrible pain Farron would inflict upon him. He navigated through the castle and down to the dungeon, pausing outside the cell he had locked the woman in. He considered what to do, doubting that Farron would overlook this discretion. Liam knew he was expendable to Farron. He kicked the cell door in frustration, startling the woman. I'm sorry, he said, haltingly. Though his voice had returned, he had trouble forming the words after spending so long in silence. What was he going to do? He couldn't bring her up alive. He couldn't return without a body. And he certainly couldn't simply not return, unless... Liam smiled as he considered that very course of action. He could sneak the woman out one of the side entrances and also leave himself. Farron would try to hunt him down, he knew, but he considered it worth the risk. He had already died. What could be worse? Lady, he said as he unlocked the cell, I hope you feel up to running. Octavia looked at him questioningly. We're going to escape this place, he informed her. Stay close, and whatever happens, run as fast as you can when we get outside the walls. Liam helped her to her feet and led her out of the cell. Are you ready? He asked her. She nodded her head resolutely. I am. Farron scowled at Vyas. Where is he? He's taking too long. Vyas shrugged, thinking the same thing himself. I'll get him. No, Farron interrupted. I need you to keep him, he pointed to Broderick, subdued. Do not let him move. What's taking so long, Farron? I should hope you are not foolish enough to play games with me, Nidria said accusingly. She folded her arms across her chest. Farron growled beneath his breath. He raised his hand and quickly chanted several words. The air around him crackled, and a bolt of lightning flung forth from his hand, arcing dangerously close through the air before striking Nidria to the ground. Derek and Kira flung themselves out of the way and avoided the worst. They were both disoriented. Nidria got up from the ground, her clothes singed and smoking. So this is what you resort to, she screamed at him, attacking a fellow sorcerer. She raised her arms and traced symbols into the air, weaving her fingers in intricate patterns. The ground began to shake violently, causing the soldiers to cry out. Nidria ignored them and kept the spell going. The stone wall of the castle began to shake as well. Some of the stones came free of the wall, crashing to the ground with thunderous sounds. Farron wrapped his hands around his staff, and slammed the butt end of it down. Be still, he commanded. Nidria's spell suddenly failed, and the ground stopped heaving. The surprise was evident on her face. Farron smirked at her, then pointed his staff toward her and began to chant again, calling the power of the air to his aid. Dark clouds swirled above them. The soldiers began to flee in terror. Derek shouted for them to stop. They didn't listen. A vicious wind picked up, whipping snow and ice around violently. He shouted several words of magic, and a vortex of flame descended from the clouds. Nidria knelt down and summoned a shield to protect herself. Pale blue light flared up around her, protecting her from the heat and the fire. Farron repeated the phrase 2 more times, causing 2 more identical vortexes of flame to join the first. The old wizard cackled madly. His eyes were bloodshot, and sweat gathered on his brow. He began to move his staff in a circle, and as he did so, the 3 twisters of fire began to spin around Nidria. Farron decided at that moment that he had allowed her to thwart his will long enough. He dropped the staff, put his hands together, rubbing them faster and faster. The 3 twisters began to spin around Nidria rapidly, slowly coalescing until it was a solid, spherical wall of intense flame. He watched the whirlwind of flames spiraling meters high, spinning around and around. It was like a scene from hell, Farron thought. His hands went up and blew into them. The flames intensified for a moment and then went out, leaving the charred remains of Nidria in its wake. Vyas gaped at the display of power, unknowingly loosening his hold on Broderick. Vyas grunted as Broderick elbowed him in the stomach, blasting the breath from him. He broke free of Vias's hold, turned, and kicked off the wall. The apprentice flailed wildly as he fell backward, landing with a dull thud in the courtyard. Roderick turned his attention to Farron. He sprinted toward the old man, intending to tackle him to the ground. Quicker than Broderick thought possible, Farron swept up his staff and pointed at Broderick. He chanted off another spell, and stopped Broderick's momentum with a suddenness that made him gasp. Farron held him in place and shuffled over slowly. "I've had enough fun," he said. The old wizard snatched the leather pouch that contained the shard from Broderick's belt and flung Broderick off the wall with a jerk of his staff. Broderick flew through the air and landed roughly on the ground, skidding to a stop. He could feel his skin burning in pain and cried out in pain. Darkness threatened to overwhelm him, but he forced himself to stay conscious. He crawled toward the gate he attempted to escape from earlier. Then he saw Octavia and Liam slinking in the shadows, heading in the same direction. He got up and tried to run, but instead stumbled. The pain in his leg was almost unbearable. He looked back fearfully, thinking Farron would be there to strike him down, but Farron's attention was consumed by the shard. Roger could see the glint of the stone in the old wizard's hand. Roderick lamented its loss, but he knew life would be easier without it. He looked to where Vias had fallen, and saw he still lay there, unmoving. He looked back to the gate, to see Octavia and Liam disappear through it. He pushed himself harder, and managed to lurch through the gate. He was out of the castle, but still far from freedom. He reached Derek and Kira shortly after Octavia did. Liam was nowhere to be seen. He tripped and fell, panting heavily. Kira helped him up. They stared into each other's eyes in silence, and Kira lowered her head. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "You were right. You didn't know what Morel did. I can't lose you," she said brokenly. Roderick touched her face and smiled. "I forgive you. We can talk about this later. We have to get out of here." "Can you make it?" Derek asked, concerned. Roderick nodded. "We have to hurry. I fear Farron will be quick behind us." Kira nodded in agreement. "Now hurry." Derek led them away from the castle. Roderick leaned on Kira for support and followed after his cousin. After nearly an hour, they reached a massive campsite. The small contingent of men that Derek had hired had retreated back to it, and the commander of the force greeted them sheepishly as they approached. "My apologies," he said with a bow. "My men are not accustomed to fighting against magic. I will refund everything you paid us." "It seems loyalty is cheap these days," Derek replied. The commander lowered his head in disgrace. "Pack up camp, and let's get out of here," Derek ordered. The commander shook his head. "We shouldn't travel at night. There's no telling what we will come against in this place, and it's too cold to travel. Let us rest, and we can leave first thing in the morning." Derek didn't argue, but he was too tired to. He merely nodded, and the commander left, and Derek turned to the three of them. "I thought I'd never see you again," he said to Octavia. He kissed her passionately and held her close for long moments, before hesitantly releasing his wife. She was sobbing. "How is Claire?" she asked, after she gathered control of herself. "She's fine," he assured her. Then he embraced Broderick. "Cousin, I thought you were dead. When you didn't return, I feared the worst. I hired this band of mercenaries and searched the countryside. I found the necromancer after the soldiers slaughtered a horde of goblins that were attacking Ravendale. She led us to Nidria," his expression darkened, "who in turn led us to that castle. It pains me that she died so horribly." "She knew what she was up against," Kira said. "Farron is a powerful wizard, and now that he knows you have the shard, there is no telling what he will do to get it." "Let's not worry about that now," Broderick said. "If I don't get off my legs, I may pass out." Kira helped Broderick over to one of the many fires the soldiers had lit for warmth. They nestled next to each other. Kira stroked her fingers through his hair and stared at him. "I feared we would not reach you in time," she whispered. "But you did," he replied. They sat in silence for a long while. Broderick was exhausted, but he could not fall asleep. Eventually, the fire began to burn low. "I'll put some more wood in it," Broderick said. He struggled to get up, and Kira pushed him down. "You rest. I'll get it." She got up and wandered over to a large pile of logs the soldiers had cut, and returned with a few of them. She tossed them into the embers and returned to Broderick's side. She helped him sit up, and they sat staring into the flames. The fire sputtered suddenly as if something was thrown into it. The flames wavered, convulsed, and then split down the middle. Kira saw the familiar face of Skiram in the fire. She eyed the demon distrustfully. "I did not summon you," she said. Broderick trembled. "What is that?" he asked tremulously. "He is a demon," she answered, not taking her eyes off the foul creature. Skiram's face split into a grin, and the demon laughed. "You share your bed with him, but you don't share your life," Skiram taunted. Kira growled in anger. Leave, Skiram, or I will vanquish you right now. Skiram's face grew serious. I have come to name my sacrifice, foolish woman. In 9 months' time, I will come to you again and you will honor our deal. Kira's face scrunched up in confusion. 9 months? What are you talking about? Take your sacrifice now and be done with our deal. I want nothing more to do with you, she spat. Skiram laughed again. I would take my sacrifice now, but it is not ready. It must yet grow within you. Broderick clenched Kira's hand in his, not understanding any of it. Realization slowly dawned on him. No, Kira snarled. No, I will not honor our deal. What is happening? Broderick asked. He looked from Kira to the demon. Skiram seemed to enjoy the torment that was evident on Kira's face. Don't you know? The demon asked. That's right, you don't. The necromancer and I made a deal. The knowledge of the secret entrance into the church in Ravendale for a sacrifice of my choosing. What are you asking of her? I will fulfill the deal, Broderick said. Skiram's face contorted oddly as the demon laughed a third time. I'm afraid you aren't able to, he said. The sacrifice is hers alone to give. You are bound to honor our deal. There is no way to break it, as you well know. I demand the life of the child growing within you, Skiram said with finality. The flame shot up into the air and faded from sight, leaving the fire as if nothing had happened. Child, Broderick repeated. He looked dazedly at Kira. Yes, she said, staring sadly into the flames. Her hand moved to her stomach. Our child. All right, that's it for this week. Be back next week with another video, and hope you guys are enjoying the story. See you next week.